This is Wednesday, June the 17th, 2015, and this is Damian Macy and Friends of the Marshall Public Library Oral History Project, and I'm visiting this evening at the lovely home of Ken and Nancy Claypool. We just finished an interview with Nancy, and her husband Ken is here, who has an interesting history and a family background in our community. So with that, I will introduce you to Ken, and here he is.
Hi Damien, thanks for coming. I appreciate it. I have a list of questions I am going to answer.
You don't have to, you can follow, or just
Okay.
at your leisure.
All right. I was born in Terre Haute, Indiana, September 27th, 1951, and my parents were James and Virginia Claypool. And my sister is Connie Claypool, but she's married to John McNary, so Connie McNary. I was born and raised in Marshall, went to grade school here, went to high school here, and I moved away with my job and for school, and then I returned to Marshall with my lovely wife, Nancy. I actually lived in two neighborhoods. I lived in the south end of town on Cherry Street, 509 Cherry Street, and it was a modest home, but it was a castle to me. I thoroughly enjoyed it and loved it. And then my mom and dad built the home that we are in now at 606 North 7th Street. And Nancy and I bought it from my mom and moved in here about 15 years ago. And this is in the north end of town, so I've been in both ends of town, and both are delightful. They're different, but they're very nice. I was able to go to South grade school.
Okay.
And I thoroughly enjoyed that, made a lot of friends. That was the school where the south end of Marshall kids went, as well as the country kids. And the north end, the north school, was comprised of the kids that lived in the north end of town.
Again, was the old school, the old 2- or 3-story building still there?
Yes,
Is that when you
it was
went
still
to?
there. Well, I went to both. I went to kindergarten in the Ohio Oil Building, and then first, second, third, and fourth grade, I was in the relatively new South School building, and then fifth and sixth grade, I was in the old school, the old South School building, which is no longer there.
Mm-hmm.
And what I remember about transferring into the old building was, and I say transferring because it was a huge transition. You wouldn't think it would be, but it was. It was scary for a kid to go from the one building to the other building. But what I remember most about the old building were the very, very creaky wooden floors and the very high ceilings. And it was intimidating until, of course, after the first couple of weeks when you became used to it. It has a different perspective as a child.
Do you remember your teachers there?
I do. I had Mrs. Heck in 5th grade, and 6th grade I think was Mrs. Beals, I think. That was in the old building. The new building I had Elsie Jane Mars.
Mm-hmm.
I can't remember which grade, first or second. Mrs. Shade, Myrtle Shade, was my 4th grade teacher. Mrs. Simpson was my 3rd grade teacher. And I can't remember who my first or second teacher was that wasn't Elsie Jane. And my kindergarten teacher in the Ohio building was Alice Titus.
Okay.
I can tell you a little bit about my childhood. My mom stayed at home to raise me, and we bonded early. I sat at her table when she sewed, and I watched her cook, and she taught me reading and writing, and I was able to color sitting by her when she did things. We were pretty close, and I remember her walking me to school, my very first day of school, from my house down to the kindergarten. She walked me all the way to school, probably several days and finally she walked me like half of the way. And I remember turning around and looking at her, and she stayed right there until I got to the school. And then finally, I walked all the way by myself to school. I still remember that. That's vivid. And I loved riding my bicycle. When I learned to ride a bicycle, it was a whole new world. And my friends and I rode all around that neighborhood. I have fond memories of my childhood.
Did you start out on the small bicycle and then graduate to full size?
Yes,
or did you get full size to start with?
No, I started out on a smaller bicycle with training wheels, and then my dad took the training wheels off, and then I finally grew into a larger bicycle.
Okay.
And it was a lot of fun. It was like freedom, because I was able to get out of my block. I was able, when I first started to learn to ride, I'll never forget this, my mom said I could go around the block, and she watched me. And I had to stay on the sidewalk all the way around the block. And then gradually I ventured farther and farther out, until eventually I could ride my bike to the swimming pool, which was a lot of fun. That was a big adventure. Huge.
Freedom.
Yeah, it was great.
Did you have some chores and some things that had to be done around home?
I remember having to carry the trash out. We burned our trash back in those days, so I would carry my trash out to the burn barrel, which is unheard of nowadays, of course.
Yes.
And I remember taking the cans out. My dad had a gunny sack in the garage, and I used to put the cans in that. And then when it would get full, he and I would take that sack of cans and other things to the dump. I would help my dad shovel coal into the furnace in the wintertime. I remember coming home from being at my grandmother's or Terre Haute, and the house was really cold because, of course, there was no thermostat. And I would hit the sheets, and it would be ice cold in bed because it took a while for the house to warm up. So I'd go down and help my dad shovel coal in the furnace. We'd burn our trash in the furnace in the wintertime. And so those were my chores. I kind of helped my dad with his dogs. He had 2 hunting dogs, and I would help feed and water them. I'd be with my dad. I probably didn't really help. I just hung out with him. I started mowing yards when I was young. It was great. I was able to walk the mower up to my dad's insurance office on 6th Street, which was on the 1 block south of the square. And I mowed my dad's office and Johnny Hollenbeck's law office, which took all of probably 5 or 10 minutes. And it was a great thrill because I'd go to each, my dad and Johnny Hollenbeck, and get paid $1 for each one of those, which was really being overpaid. It took me longer to walk up there than it did to mow the yards. And then I mowed the Marshall House courtyard because it was right by my dad's office. That was my 3rd yard. And then when we moved up to this house in the north end, I probably had up to 20 yards I mowed. And it kept me busy. And it was great because I was earning money. I just loved it. And with the money that I earned, I bought fishing lures and comic books. And I loved going to the swimming pool. I'd get done mowing and go to the swimming pool. And I still, as I walk or ride my bicycle around the neighborhood, I can point out every yard I mowed, and I know everything there is to know about those yards because I mowed them quite frequently. And I made a lot of good friends with the older ladies that I mowed for. I mean, because, they were great to me. They would give me not only my earnings, cash, which was a thrill for a kid, but they would usually give me a 16-ounce bottle of Coke or Pepsi, which I couldn't possibly drink, but they wanted me to drink it, and usually a large candy bar. Yeah, it was great. They were very nice. Mrs. Hornbrook was one of the nicest ones down here on the corner that I mowed for.
Did that yard mowing and all kind of help as your interest today about gardening and working in the yard?
I still enjoy mowing the yard. I still remember the lessons my dad gave me about mowing the yard, about trimming and blowing the sidewalk off when I'm done. And when Nancy and I walk and I see a sidewalk that hasn't been blown off, I kind of cringe and I tell her, I said, these people don't know how to mow. Their sidewalk hasn't been blown off. The cuttings haven't been blown off. And that was a bad deal with my dad, so it stuck with me. So yes, I think the mowing plus my mom being from a farm, she had a rural background, that's what probably piqued my interest in gardening and vegetables and flowers. She was from a farm in Palestine, Illinois. She was a farm girl.
From some of those early memories, did you have some hobbies or some things that kept you busy in some of your spare time?
When I was younger, we used to play a lot of pickup basketball games in the different neighborhoods. We played a lot of basketball. We played some football, some baseball. We swam a lot. We fished. I hunted with my dad. Hunting was my dad's sport. He didn't care that much about football, basketball, baseball, but he loved to hunt quail and pheasant. And I started hunting with him when I was a young boy, and I'd carry my BB gun because I wasn't big enough to hold a shotgun. So what I would do, I'll never forget this, he would set me in the woods. I'd get too tired because I was so small, because hunting's a lot of walking. And so he would set me in the woods on a log and say, "Now don't move, stay right here and we'll be back." And I'd sit there with my BB gun, and I don't know how much time would go by, but eventually I would think, well, they've forgotten me, and I was about to panic, and all of a sudden one of the dogs would come back, and I knew not too far behind would be my dad, because the dogs were always out in front of my dad. And I was always relieved when I saw one of those dogs. So, and then I got older and started carrying a shotgun and hunted with him.
And of course, sometimes at an early age, 5 minutes seems like 5 hours too.
Oh, exactly. Yes. There's a big difference in perspective of an older person and a young person in terms of time, size. I mean, it's totally different.
Okay, from the mowing yards and all, did you do that moving into high school? While you were in high school also?
Yes, I didn't give up all my yards until I went to college. I started working at the Marshall swimming pool when I was in probably 7th grade or 8th grade. I was a basket boy. And so after a basket boy, I was a lifeguard, and then I became the manager of the swimming pool. So as my swimming pool duties increased, I had to let some of my yards go. And so that my yard mowing decreased as my swimming pool responsibilities increased. And then when I went to college, I gave up all my yards and worked at the swimming pool and other places. So I mowed yards until probably I graduated from high school. It was a great background. It was a great job. I loved it.
And a few pesos helped with some of the expenses.
Oh, the earning of money was powerful. That was to get actual cash in my hand from doing work was a great lesson. I mean, it probably had an effect on me and how I created my future, because I'll never forget the feeling that it was to earn money. It was fabulous. And I was taught to save. And I did. I saved. I opened a bank account, a savings account. And I had a little spending money, but my mom and dad made sure I didn't spend too much of it. And it wasn't too frivolous. I mean, I would buy some comic books and some fishing lures, but they monitored that to make sure I didn't go hog wild and spend it all on.
You mentioned comic books. Have you saved any of those that you had?
Oh, I wish I had. I don't know what happened to them. I think my mom must have gotten rid of them when I moved out, because I had a great collection of comic books. I loved them, and they disappeared. Doggone it! I could have retired a long time ago. I don't have any comic books left from my past.
I don't either. I wish I did. I had a lot of them also.
I did too.
In going to school, was there some particular favorite subjects that you had?
I liked Bill Wyke as a teacher. He taught history, American history, and maybe I liked American history as well, but Bill Wyke was a dynamic teacher, extremely interesting, no-nonsense approach. He was like a preview to college, is what he was, and it was a breath of fresh air. Cass McNary was an excellent teacher. She was tough. She taught Latin. I took 4 years of Latin, and Cass was a tough teacher. She was another preview of college. She was no nonsense. She was quite the disciplinarian, but she earned respect I would never have thought about doing anything wrong in Cass's room because I respected her. It wasn't because of, well, maybe there was some fear there. So I don't think the subjects stick out, but the teachers do.
Yeah.
And that would be Cass and Bill. They were great teachers. And Don McNary as a principal was awesome. I loved him. He demanded respect as well. He didn't demand it, he commanded it. He didn't demand it, it just came to him. Yes, his height and his physical prowess helped a lot in that regard.
I'm sure it did.
Because he was like 6'7", which was very large for back in that day.
What year did you graduate from high school?
1969.
Okay. What path did you take after graduation?
I went to the University of Illinois and graduated from there. I had it narrowed down between the U of I and Southern Illinois University at Carbondale and Eastern Illinois University at Charleston. And I think what persuaded me to go to the U of I was my sister was there. She was a senior when I was a freshman. And I thought college was going to be somewhat intimidating and that my sister would be a great crutch. And she was. She was a great help. She helped me out a lot my first semester and second semester. It was great having her there.
What did you major in?
I majored in social sciences. I had a teacher's certificate. I could teach grades 6 through 12. My major was history and my minor was political science.
Did you ever teach?
No, I was hired by Marathon. When I worked shift work at the Robinson Refinery, I did a little bit of substitute teaching at Robinson High School. Not much, because it was hard with the shift work. I mean, you know, I needed the time off to rest. So I got hired by Marathon Pipeline Company and spent 35 and a half years with Marathon and then retired about 3.5 years ago.
You're with them 35 years, you said?
35 and a half years, yes.
Okay. Any unusual experiences that happened during that time?
Yeah,
I'm sure you had some.
I could write a book on my experiences with Marathon. I had a fairly diverse career. I started in Patoka, Illinois in operations. And I knew nothing about pipelines. I knew nothing about the oil industry. And so it was a big learning experience. And I was in Patoka for, I don't know, 5 or 6 months. And I was sent on a temporary assignment to to Detroit, Michigan. And then I was sent on a temporary assignment to Samaria, Michigan. And then I was sent on a temporary assignment to New Orleans and Baton Rouge, Louisiana. And they finally told me to get rid of my house in Patoka because I wasn't going back. My job had been filled. So that wasn't very reassuring. And then I went on a temporary assignment back up to Samaria. And I got tired of the nomad life. So I got tired of the motels and the traveling. So I bid on a job in Robinson, which was nice because I was able to return back close to home. So I spent 2.5 years working for Marathon Pipeline Company inside the Robinson Refinery. And then I was transferred to Findlay, Ohio, which is the corporate headquarters of Marathon. And that's where I met Nancy. Nancy was doing a summer internship program with Marathon in the Findlay corporate headquarters, and we met and we started dating by playing tennis. She was a good tennis player and I wasn't. So she beat me and thrashed me. And then I got transferred to Martinsville, and she stayed in the Findlay area. She was actually going to Bowling Green State University, which is only 30 miles north of Findlay. So she stayed to complete her senior year, and then the rest of my career was spent in Martinsville, Illinois. And Nancy and I married this summer after she graduated in 1981.
81.
So we've been happily married and living here in Marshall ever since. I moved to Marshall in 1980, the fall of 1980. Nancy joined me in the summer of 1981, and we've been here ever since. And we've loved it. It's been a fabulous community. We sit out on our front porch and just are so thankful that we live here.
Watch the world go by.
Oh, we love it. There's nothing better than to sit on our front porch and see maybe 1 or 2 cars in an hour. Because the older I get, the more I require quiet.
Amen.
And when we travel, it's so enjoyable to come home to our house and to our neighborhood. And having Damien and Eleanor as our neighbors is fabulous.
Thank you. You mentioned your dad had hunting dogs.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you had a dog as a pet for a while.
We
Yeah,
did.
didn't you?
Our dog was Beauty, and she was our family pet. Damien and I are both smiling. We both have a love for dogs, just like our wives do. And they had Lucky and we had Beauty, and they looked like they were twins. Lucky was a little bit taller, and that was the only difference. They had to have been related somewhere along the line. They just looked so much alike. And Beauty was our family dog, and one of the hardest things we've ever had to do was to call our boys and tell them that Beauty died. And we couldn't tell Ethan. He was in the Marines serving in Iraq in Ramadi, and so we had to wait for him to contact us. And those 3 conversations were extremely difficult, and many tears were shed, I'll be honest about that, because she was awfully close like a child.
Right.
And we buried Beauty in the corner of our fenced-in backyard back here, and that's where she remains.
And Ken, people that don't have a pet just don't realize that they are part of a family.
They are.
And just some people just don't realize that.
And that, especially when they grow up with your kids and they play with your kids, and they become very close.
Ken, over the time that you're working and all, has there been some event that's taken place in the world that you say, boy, that really impacted me and changed my life?
A worldly event, I can't think of a worldly event that changed my life. A personal event changed my life. I was able to witness a miracle, and that was the birth of our son Tyler. I was able to be in the delivery room and witness his birth, and that had a profound impact on me. I was not able to witness the birth of our twins because Nancy had a cesarean section with them because one of the boys was breech, and at that time cesarean sections, the husband was not allowed in the surgical room for that. I think in today's age they can be, but back then we weren't allowed.
With all the modern conveniences and things that we have, is there anything in particular that is a convenience or something that you said, gosh, I just couldn't live without that?
Indoor plumbing, without a doubt. I heard you ask that question to Nancy, and that's the first thing that popped in my mind. Indoor toilets are a wonderful invention. I've never had to use an outhouse on a regular basis, but I do appreciate having the facilities inside, especially in the wintertime. Showers, running water, going to the sink and getting a drink of water whenever I want to is greatly appreciated because there's so many countries in the world that that's a luxury and maybe even non-existent. So indoor plumbing is huge. Our country is very blessed with clean water.
With the experiences you had with Marathon, and we hear all things now about, the dangers of pipelines and all, and I know every once in a while one of them does bring a leak.
Yep.
What is your feeling about this XL pipeline they're proposing from Canada to the Midwest?
I don't have any feelings either way. I know the upsides and the downsides of that project, and there's a lot of politics involved. I mean, it can be a boon to the economy. There's a lot of construction dollars there to be had. There's a lot of tax incentives to be had. It does raise somewhat of a danger to the environment. That oil is more corrosive than other oils.
Oh, I didn't know that.
And any pipeline is subject to breaking and releasing its contents. I've been involved in many oil spills, many refined petroleum product spills, and it's a very sad situation to see the environment contaminated. I will say that my company was extremely responsible and went beyond the government standards in cleanup. When we had a release, we will be a presence at that site until the government body that oversees that cleanup releases us from that site, and we're usually there longer. If there's no visible oil or products to clean up, we'll have underground monitoring wells to make sure that there's nothing still beneath the ground, beneath the surface. I've seen Marathon do some remarkable cleanup jobs. I mean, absolutely phenomenal. We really pour the resources to that effort. It was enjoyable to work for a responsible company, but it was heartbreaking to come upon the scene and see the environmental damage right after the release occurred. And I was usually one of the first people on the scene.
And I'm sure the general public has no concept and no idea what is done, what's required to clean that kind of problem up.
Not unless it's the landowner on whose property it occurred. But you're right, the general public has no concept. Unless you've worked through one, they'll never understand what all resources it takes to respond to a release. It's an emergency situation because you have drinking water involved, you have nature, I mean animals, wildlife, vegetation at risk. The oil or the products or chemicals, they're hazardous chemicals, they're very volatile. I've seen fires and the result of fires that resulted from leaks. So it's a very dangerous and unhealthy situation. It's extremely volatile and it's very strenuous.
Did you feel some danger in some of those situations?
Yes. Yeah, there was danger. I knew there was danger. I didn't have one of the more dangerous jobs, but anytime you're in that area, there's a possibility of danger. Now, the first responders have more danger than what I had. The first responders would be the ones that actually come and lay out the boom to collect the oil or the product and start sucking it up and cleaning it up. And so I didn't have one of the more dangerous jobs, but I had the sense of danger. I guess I did. I had a healthy respect for the situation because we had such extensive training. Marathon is on the cutting edge of training and takes it very, very seriously. They're very progressive.
Well, Ken, it's really been enjoyable visiting with you. And if you were in, say, another country, and you're talking to someone about Illinois, an old town called Marshall, what would you tell them about the town and why it might be a good place to visit or to live?
I've been in other countries and I have talked about Marshall. And I'll just cite one example. This is one of the more interesting conversations because when you travel, as you know, you invariably talk about your hometown. And other people talk about theirs, which I find very interesting because we're all from different environments. And it's interesting to rub shoulders with people of different parts of the country and learn about their towns, their cities, their countries. So we took a trip to Europe within the last year and a half, and one of the people that was on the tour, well, he and his wife, they were from Hong Kong, which is a very populous city / country. I think there's like millions and millions and millions of people. He told me, we were at dinner one night, and he was telling me about where he lived and how many millions of people lived in such a small area. Oh yeah, it was all vertical. It was all, I mean, the traffic, the pollution. He was telling me all about this. He told me, and I was just like, my head was just reeling, listening to all. I just couldn't imagine living there. And he said, so Ken, he said, where do you live? I said, well, I live in Marshall, Illinois. And he said, well, how large of a city is that? And I said, well, our town is probably around 4,000 people. He said, did you say 400,000 people? I said, no, 4,000. He said, did you say 40,000? I said, no, 4,000 people. And he just starts chuckling. he said, well, I just can't imagine, just like I couldn't imagine living where he lived, he says, I can't imagine living there in a town of 4,000 people. There's probably 4,000 people in his apartment building. And I said, well, actually, it's quite delightful. I said, we really enjoy it. He goes, well, what's it like to live in a town that small? I said, well, here's what it's like. I said, we can sit on our front porch and we might see one car on a Saturday or Sunday morning per hour. And he just about fell out of his chair laughing. He was just incredulous that such a place could exist. And the interesting thing about it is, neither one of us would trade places with the other if we had the choice. I couldn't imagine living there, he couldn't imagine living here, and we were both happy in our own environments. And I thank God that he placed Nancy and I and our families here in Marshall. This is where we love it here, and this is, we're so grateful that we're here.
Well, thanks again, Ken. It's been a delight visiting with you, and I think, as I have told most people, this may not be so much importance to people today, but down the line, these things will be read and will be reviewed. And I say, gee, I didn't know that about Mr. Claypool, or that about Marshall, and it'll be filling in some of the gaps in future history.
Well, thank you for coming and for interviewing me.
Really appreciate it, and
privileged.
appreciate your time and your hospitality.
Thank
you so much.
Bye-bye.